In the ancient land of Israel, during a time of great turmoil and idolatry, during the reigns of Kings Ahab and Ahaziah, as told in 1 Kings 17:19 and 2 Kings 1:2, one man emerged as a mighty prophet of God. His name was Elijah. Ahab, king of Israel, surpassed all previous rulers in wickedness. He not only followed his forefather Jeroboam's sinful ways, but also married Jezebel and worshipped the pagan god Baal, igniting the Lord's wrath. King Ahab of Israel reigned with wickedness, but his reign was about to be interrupted by the bold prophet. Elijah, a man from Tishbe in Gilead, stood before the king and delivered a harsh message. "There will be no rain, not a drop will fall from the sky until I say so." This was no empty threat. Ahab's evil ways had angered God, and Elijah was the vessel of a coming drought. But God had a plan for Elijah too. He instructed the prophet to head east and hide by a brook called Chariot. There, Elijah would be sustained by an unlikely source: ravens. God himself commanded these birds to bring Elijah food every morning and evening. For a while, this unusual arrangement provided for the prophet. However, this peace did not last. As the drought intensified, the once reliable Kerith Brook eventually dried up, leaving Elijah in a precarious situation. The Lord, ever present in Elijah's journey, intervened again. He instructed Elijah to travel to a new location, a village called Zarephath. There, God promised, a widow would provide for him. Entering the village, Elijah encountered a woman gathering sticks, a clear sign of desperate times. He requested a simple drink of water, then some bread. But the woman revealed a harsh reality. She had barely enough food left to sustain herself and her son for one last meal. Despite her own dire circumstances, Elijah, with unwavering faith in God's word, implored her to use her meager supplies to first make him some bread. He assured her that God would miraculously replenish her dwindling resources. The woman, with a hesitant trust, followed his instructions. And as Elijah had proclaimed, a miracle unfolded. The jar of flour and jug of oil remained inexplicably full, providing sustenance for Elijah, the widow, and her son for many days. However, tragedy struck. The widow's son fell gravely ill and died. Grief-stricken and questioning Elijah's presence, the woman accused him of bringing misfortune. Undeterred, Elijah took the lifeless child and carried him to a private room. There, in a display of profound faith and fervent prayer, Elijah pleaded with God to restore the child's life. The Lord heard Elijah's cry. Miraculously, the child's breath returned, and life surged back into his body. Overcome with joy and newfound faith, the widow acknowledged Elijah as a true prophet of God, recognizing the divine power that flowed through him. The drought had gripped the land for years, a harsh consequence of King Ahab's wickedness. But now the Lord instructed Elijah to return and confront the king. Obadiah, venturing out on a royal errand, was startled to see Elijah approaching. Fear and worry clouded his features. "Is it really you, my lord Elijah?" he stammered, aware of the potential consequences of encountering the prophet. Unlike Ahab and Jezebel, Obadiah secretly followed the Lord. In fact, he had bravely defied Jezebel's murderous rampage against God's prophets, hiding 100 of them in caves. Fear gripped Obadiah as he learned of Elijah's return. He knew the dangers involved, the relentless pursuit Ahab had waged to find the elusive prophet. Elijah, his voice firm, confirmed Obadiah's suspicions. Obadiah pleaded with Elijah, reminding him of the dangers that awaited him at the hands of Ahab. But Elijah, unwavering in his commitment to God, declared his intention to confront the king that very day. Obadiah informed the palace on the arrival of Elijah. As news of Elijah's arrival reached Ahab, the king, his face etched with anger, hurried to meet Elijah, calling him the troublemaker of Israel. A clash was imminent. Elijah, the lone prophet of the Lord, summoned King Ahab and all Israel to Mount Carmel. Standing before the king, 450 prophets of Baal, a stark contrast in their numbers but not in their conviction. He said to the people, "How much longer will you waver, hobbling between two opinions? If the Lord is God, follow him. But if Baal is God, then follow him." But the people were completely silent. Elijah issued a bold challenge. "I am the only prophet of the Lord who is left, but Baal has 450 prophets. Now bring 2 bulls. The prophets of Baal may choose whichever one they wish, and cut it into pieces, and lay it on the wood of their altar, but without setting fire to it. I will prepare the other bull and lay it on the wood on the altar, but not set fire to it. Then call on the name of your God, and I will call on the name of the Lord. The God who answers by setting fire to the wood is the true God." And all the people agreed. It was a test of faith by fire, a fiery duel between the prophets of Baal and the one true God, Yahweh. The prophets of Baal, adorned in their ceremonial robes, eagerly took up the challenge. They prepared their offering, chanting and dancing around the altar dedicated to their false god. But from sunrise to noon there was no response. Their frantic pleas and self-inflicted wounds failed to rouse Baal from his supposed slumber. Elijah, with a touch of sarcasm, mocked their futile efforts, urging them to shout louder. Perhaps their god was taking a long nap. The prophets of Baal, frenzied and desperate, inflicted wounds upon themselves, hoping to appease their god. But their efforts were in vain. The prophets of Baal were exposed as frauds. Finally, Elijah stepped forward. With methodical precision, he repaired the broken altar of the Lord and prepared the sacrifice. Then, in a dramatic display of faith, he drenched the offering with water, creating a seemingly insurmountable obstacle for any fire to ignite. Elijah raised his voice to the heavens, calling upon the true God. And with a mighty roar, fire erupted from the sky, consuming the offering, the stones, and even the water. The people, witnessing this undeniable miracle, fell to their knees, proclaiming, "The Lord, He is God." This pivotal moment marked a turning point. Elijah, the lone prophet, had stood against the tide of idolatry and emerged victorious. Justice was served as Elijah ordered the capture and execution of the false prophets. Victory on Mount Carmel was sweet, but the test wasn't over. Elijah, having proven the power of the one true God, delivered a message to King Ahab. It was time to eat and drink, for a mighty rainstorm was on its way. Ahab, perhaps seeking comfort after the public display of his false god's impotence, readily followed this advice. Meanwhile, Elijah retreated to the mountaintop. In a fervent prayer posture, he pleaded with God, his face hidden between his knees. 7 times he sent his servant to scan the horizon for signs of rain. Finally, a sliver of hope emerged. A tiny cloud, no bigger than a man's hand, rising from the sea. This seemingly insignificant speck was enough for Elijah. With renewed urgency, he dispatched his servant with a message for Ahab. "Flee for home, or the rain will trap you." The once proud king, humbled by the display of God's power, wasted no time. Dark clouds rapidly filled the sky, the wind howled, and a mighty storm unleashed its fury. Ahab, desperate to escape the downpour, sped towards Jezreel. But Elijah, invigorated by the Lord's strength, was not finished. He tucked his cloak into his belt, a sign of readiness for action, and then, with superhuman speed, outran Ahab's chariot all the way to the gates of Jezreel, a testament to his unwavering faith and God's enduring favor. The long drought was finally breaking, and with it, a new chapter was beginning for the land of Israel. Ahab, shaken by the events on Mount Carmel, returned home and recounted everything to his fierce wife, Jezebel.
No.
Infuriated by Elijah's defiance and the demise of her prophets, Jezebel sent a chilling message. "You're a dead man walking, Elijah. By tomorrow, the gods will strike you down, just like you killed mine. Fear, A powerful emotion, even for a mighty prophet, gripped Elijah. He fled for his life, the weight of Jezebel's threat and the burden of his mission pressing heavily upon him. He journeyed south to Beersheba, leaving his servant behind. Alone and weary, Elijah ventured deep into the desolate wilderness. Exhausted and overwhelmed, he reached a point of despair. Under the meager shade of a solitary broom tree, Elijah cried out to God, expressing a deep longing for death. But even in his darkest hour, God's love and providence prevailed. An angel, a messenger of God, appeared beside Elijah, not with condemnation, but with sustenance. The angel gently nudged Elijah to wake up and eat the miraculous food that had materialized: bread baked on hot stones and a jar of water. This divine intervention renewed Elijah's strength, both physically and emotionally. The angel, urging Elijah to eat again, emphasized the long journey ahead. Fortified by the heavenly food, Elijah embarked on a 40-day and 40-night trek, a pilgrimage that would lead him to Mount Sinai, the sacred mountain of God. He found refuge in a cave, ready for whatever awaited him next. Elijah, seeking refuge in the cave on Mount Sinai, found himself face to face with the very God he served. But God's presence wasn't a booming voice or a blinding light. It was a question, a gentle inquiry. "What are you doing here, Elijah?" Elijah poured out his heart, his frustration boiling over. He spoke of his unwavering devotion to God, of the broken covenant, the destroyed altars, and the brutal slaughter of the prophets. He felt utterly alone, the last one standing, a target for Jezebel's murderous rage. God's response wasn't a booming voice or a fiery display. It was a series of powerful demonstrations, a fierce windstorm, a massive earthquake, and a consuming fire. Yet God wasn't present in any of these dramatic events. Finally, after the fire subsided, a gentle whisper filled the cave. This soft sound captured Elijah's attention. He covered his face with his cloak, a sign of reverence and humility, and stepped out to the cave entrance. The question resonated once more. "What are you doing here, Elijah?" Elijah repeated his lament, his fear and despair evident. But this time, God offered a new mission, a path forward. Elijah was instructed to return, not to confront Ahab or Jezebel directly, but to travel to the wilderness of Damascus. There he would become an instrument in God's plan, anointing new leaders. Hazael as king of Aram and Jehu as king of Israel. Elisha, a faithful follower, would be chosen as Elijah's successor, carrying on the mantle of prophecy. Though Elijah felt like a lone survivor, God revealed a hidden truth. 7,000 others in Israel remained loyal. Their knees never bent before the false god Baal. Elijah's journey wasn't over. He would continue to serve God, not through open confrontation, but by setting in motion events that would reshape the future of Israel. Though fear gripped him, Elijah wasn't finished with his mission. Following God's instructions, he emerged from his solitary refuge and embarked on a new journey. Naboth was a righteous Israelite man who owned a vineyard near King Ahab's palace in Jezreel. Ahab coveted Naboth's vineyard and desired it for himself. However, Naboth refused to sell the land, as it was considered an inheritance and could not be alienated according to Israelite law, Leviticus 25:23. Ahab's wicked wife, Jezebel, devised a cruel plan. She orchestrated a false accusation against Naboth, leading to his stoning and execution. Ahab then seized the vineyard, a blatant act of theft fueled by greed and disregard for God's law. This act of injustice became a turning point in the story. Elijah, the prophet, emerged as God's spokesman, confronting Ahab with the horrific consequences of his actions. King Ahab, shaken by Elijah's prophecy, displayed remorse by tearing his clothes, wearing sackcloth, and fasting. The punishment for Ahab's crimes wouldn't be immediate, but God's judgment would ultimately fall upon Ahab's descendants. Not long after this, Ahab died. King Ahab's death left a void in Israel's leadership. His son, Ahaziah, ascended the throne, but misfortune struck. A fall from a balcony left him seriously injured. Instead of seeking help from his own God, Ahaziah, in a foolish act, dispatched messengers to a foreign deity, Baal-zebub, seeking answers about his recovery. This act enraged the Lord, who dispatched the prophet Elijah to deliver a harsh message. Ahaziah would not recover, for he had turned away from the true God. When Ahaziah's men returned with the grim news, they described the fierce prophet, a hairy man with a leather belt, leaving no doubt in the king's mind who had delivered the message. Instead of repenting, Ahaziah, fueled by pride or desperation, attempted to arrest Elijah. He sent not one, but 3 groups of soldiers to apprehend the prophet. The first 2 groups met a fiery demise as Elijah called down divine judgment, fire raining down from heaven, a terrifying display of God's power protecting his prophet. Finally, a wise captain approached Elijah with humility, begging for mercy. With the Lord's approval, Elijah accompanied the captain to the king. Face to face with Ahaziah, Elijah reiterated the Lord's condemnation for seeking help from a false god. This act of disobedience would cost the king his life. True to Elijah's words, Ahaziah died from his injuries, a stark reminder of the consequences of turning away from God. His reign, marked by poor choices and a disregard for the Lord, ended abruptly. As Elijah's mission neared its end, a sense of transition filled the air. God revealed to him that the time for his departure was near. He and his faithful companion Elisha embarked on a journey together, a final act of fellowship before their paths diverged. Elijah attempted to leave Elisha behind at various points, urging him to stay in Gilgal, Bethel, and Jericho. But Elisha, with unwavering loyalty, refused to be separated. He declared his commitment with a resolute vow. As surely as the Lord lives, and you yourself live, I will never leave you. Their journey culminated at the Jordan River. There, a group of prophets witnessed a miraculous event. Elijah, using his cloak, divided the waters of the Jordan, allowing them to cross on dry ground. This awe-inspiring display foreshadowed the extraordinary way Elijah would be taken. On the other side of the river, Elijah finally acknowledged the approaching end. He offered Elisha a chance to make a request. Elisha, yearning to carry on Elijah's legacy, desired a double portion of his prophetic spirit, a request deemed difficult by Elijah. Yet he offered a condition. If Elisha witnessed his departure, his wish would be granted. Suddenly, a fiery chariot with horses of fire materialized, separating the 2 prophets. Elijah, enveloped in a whirlwind, ascended into the heavens. Elisha witnessed this extraordinary spectacle, crying out in grief and acknowledging Elijah as his father and the protector of Israel. Elijah's mission had concluded in a dramatic and unforgettable way, leaving behind a legacy and a successor ready to carry the torch.